Hi guys, Dave Clayton here. I'm the Senior Software Engineer for DCSE Limited, and this is part 3 of our technology showcase around the Fantasy F1 online portal. So in this video we're going to talk about the build and release pipeline that's in place for the project. So from a very high level overview, what we've got going on is developer works on code and commits straight into the Git repository on Azure DevOps. If you saw the previous video, you'll see how we actually structured this for using Azure DevOps. So once code is committed into the repo, we have various pipelines defined for each of the components and the microservices within the project. So they will actually trigger off a successful commit into the release candidate branch. So a build is then kicked off for the component in question and automatically assigned a version number, so something like 1.0.10. And that build pipeline will actually go through and build the project. It will run all the tests for the component if there are any. It will then package up the Docker the Docker file and build the container. It will also package up a Helm chart, and if there's any artifacts that need publishing, such as NuGet packages, it will publish those to the Azure DevOps artifacts feed. Important to note that the Docker container and the Helm chart are both stamped and tagged with the version number, so they correspond with each other. So when the Helm chart is actually installed, it will reference the Docker container with the same version. Now I'm actually then pushing the Docker container and the Helm chart to Azure Container Registry. I think I mentioned in the previous video, decided to use ACR because it allows Helm charts to be packaged and stored in that registry as well as Docker containers, as a slight advantage over Docker Hub at the moment. It's a very experimental feature at the present. It's not fully released, but it seems to work very well. So once we've got a successful build and the artifacts have been produced, that will then actually trigger a release. So we're using Kubernetes Cluster for our environment, and we are actually got multiple environments running on the same cluster. So via namespaces, we've got a CI environment where we can sort of deploy, run any smoke tests, which is what's happening here. So what we'll actually do is deploy a particular version from the build. That will then pull the relevant Helm chart and package and Docker file from the Azure Container Registry and deploy it onto the Kubernetes cluster in the CI environment. We then automatically run some smoke tests. These are very, very small Selenium tests, very quick to run. So all we're really doing is, where we're looking at a user service, for example, we register on the site and check the database that a user ends up in the database, just to integration test that component is actually working and successful. If everything goes well there and no tests fail, we then automatically deploy into the UAT environment, which again is just another namespaced set of components running on Kubernetes. So let's have a look at some of this in action. So here we have Azure DevOps portal, the homepage. Just worth mentioning, we're actually using the boards, so our work items and our backlog items are all actually defined in the tickets in here. We actually use the sprint planning. So if we look at a previous sprint, we can see burn down happening in here, some nice sort of charts and things you get. You get your task board, all your tasks. So this is a previous sprint, so everything's complete. But really nice functionality, similar to Jira, but I actually prefer this. I think it's a lot cleaner, a lot nicer to work with. So repos, here we've got our main repo and everything subfolded into components. I'll talk more about that a bit later. And then we get onto the pipelines. So if you watched the previous video, you'll know some of the architecture that we've got going. So web being the front end, so that's the Angular component. We've got the user service in here, the email service, our RabbitMQ. So all of these pipelines will actually build the relevant component, and how this actually works is, if we look in the repo and we take the user service, for example, everything needed for this service is actually contained in this folder. Any commit to this folder will trigger a build, and the way it does that is we actually have a Azure Pipelines YAML file. So we basically filter on that branch for this folder, so when the commit's detected here, this pipeline will then actually build. So if we actually have a look at that pipeline, what we'll see, when we look at the last successful job, is you can see here, so we're installing some dependencies and then the solution is built. So that runs through a build process, we then test it, and this is running end-to-end tests and integration tests, which we covered in a future video. Test results are published and the code coverage are published, and then we effectively build the Docker image, publish the Helm chart, and that's that. Nice feature as well is the code coverage. So when a build runs, we can actually see the tests that ran, so we can see all the tests pass here. You can actually filter down and actually see all the actual individual tests here that run, and you can actually plumb in your code coverage as well. So here we've got the code coverage for the user service, and nice, you can actually drill into this stuff as well. So if I wanted to look at a particular service, let's say security service, drill in, it tells me anything that's not covered, gives me a nice representation of any covered or uncovered code, which is great. Really nice, really powerful stuff. So after a successful build, so you'll see that latest build there had a version of 1026. So we can then go to the releases, and if we again look at the user service, we can see that 1026 triggered a release. So this is all automated. So on a successful build, this will then trigger. And what this does is there is the CI deployment. So it automatically deployed into the CI step, ran the smoke test, and then deployed to the UAT environment. Again, really nice, easy to use interface. So we can see here that it's sort of in more detail, and can actually edit that. And you'll see, so we've got it automated from a successful build. We come in, and here we are doing a Helm upgrade, and you'll see we pass in the build number, so that tells it which Docker image to pull. So this is the container registry, then we'll pull the Docker image and the Helm chart to deploy onto Kubernetes. That's kind of it. Probably worth having a quick look at the Kubernetes cluster. So in true Blue Peter style, here's what I prepared earlier. So this is just displaying the pods from the cluster, and you'll see here in this namespace we've then got a set of components. So we've got our web user service, RabbitMQ and email service. We actually have an SMTP service here running as well. This just allows us to integration test the email components. So when we send an email, we trap it in this SMTP server and can then validate it. It just means we're not going off to check Gmail or something like that. And then, as you can see, UAT, we there have the same set of components minus the SMTP server, because this will actually use a real SMTP service, in this case Office 365. So yeah, fully functional site there. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Speak to you soon.